Hey everyone, hello YouTube. Today I'm gonna make an attempt to do a little bit of more in-depth tutorial on the Ciat Lonbarde Cocoquantus. I know a lot of people have done tutorials before, but I just wanted to go a little more in-depth and just give my own take on the tutorial in general. So this is the Ciat Lonbarde Cocoquantus. It's a dual delay. It's a sampler. I guess you could say it's a kind of a sequencer with the stepped outputs. It's just a beautiful effects unit in general. Yeah, and we're gonna play around with it today. First, I want to go over the inputs and outputs. So it has two stereo mini jack inputs. The left channel is normal to the left side or the left delay, and the right channel is normal to the right side of the right delay. And there's a piezo jack input over here. You have your output for the piezo. This is the volume knob for it. And then you have an envelope follower output that you can use to control various things on the Coco. And then there is an XLR input. I have a gooseneck mic coming in. And you have your output for the XLR input and an envelope follower for the XLR input. Inputs, you have... These are your main inputs for the delay. Banana inputs, green, and then you have input for voltage control of the volume of the incoming signal. This is like a positive voltage control, and then this is inverse input of this. So you put a voltage in here. It'll control the input in a positive way. You put an input in here, and it'll control it in a negative way. Then you have the same thing for the effects. So you have a volume for the effect, and then a volume for the effect on the other side. When you plug it in, it'll just be white noise. So. Then, other inputs you have are CV control over the delay time or the rate or the speed. It'll pitch down as you change it. Then you have an attenuator. For that, so if you have a CV coming in, you turn it clockwise, it'll influence this in a positive way. You turn it counterclockwise, it'll influence it in a negative way. Next, as far as inputs, you have input for the trigger for the sampling. If you press this button, it'll start sampling when there's no red light, and then you press it again, and it'll hold whatever that information that you sampled is. Same for over here, and this applies to the left, and this applies to the right. And then there's trigger inputs for those. So when it receives a high voltage, it'll start sampling. And when it receives a low voltage, it'll stop, and it'll hold that. Then you have the blue jacks. So this is called the quantussy section. It's the sort of modulation center for the whole thing. You can do a lot of different things with it, but essentially it's 5 oscillators that are cross-patched. Each oscillator has a sample and hold, has 2 sample and holds. One sample and hold is sampling holding itself, and the other sample and hold is outputting a stepped voltage out of here. And it has a sync input. The green jacks are the sync input, or the trigger for the sample and hold. I think it's a little finicky, but you can read the manual too, of course. Then the blue jacks are CV inputs to control the rate of the oscillator, and the red or orange jacks are the oscillator out. Then you have a master speed control here and a chaos knob that will cross modulate all of these oscillators with each other. And then you have, the you have a rate switch for each oscillator. So in this position towards the center of the quantussy, the rate will be it'll be the slowest that it can be. In the middle, it's audio rate, and then in this position pointing towards the outside, it's like somewhere in the middle. And then we can hear that. I'm gonna put on the slowest and go into our input. And just so you can hear it in stereo, I'm gonna go to both inputs by just using a stack like that. So that's the highest it gets in the slowest mode. We have our medium mode. Also overdrives really well. I have it pushed. If you push these inputs past like noon, it'll start overdriving really nicely. They're all triangle wave oscillators, by the way. And each oscillator is not exactly the same, so I have one audio rate oscillator from this going into the right and the other one going to the left. They'll sound slightly different. Hear it with the chaos knob turned up. And that's that. And we could talk about patching the quantussy. There's a few ways I like to patch it. Let's start with an audio source. I'm gonna also patch these to both. Also note, if you want something stereo and you're patching into either of these white jacks into these, like say you take one here and you stack it into here, sometimes noise will be introduced, and the way to remove that is to just unplug it all and plug it back in. I think that's something to do with ground, but yeah, stacking outputs into the inputs will sometimes do that, only for these audio inputs jacks. Yeah, another thing to note, these, for your inputs, the oscillators are going to be much louder than your input usually. So it's useful to get like a passive attenuator sort of situation happening. I have one around here somewhere that I made. Made this little guy. The tube doesn't do anything, but it's just like an input and output, and I have a 1M trim pot in there, and this is good for just attenuating, like say you have like a synth going into the Coco, and the oscillator that you want to also go in is going to be way too loud. You could just attenuate it with like a passive little attenuator box that's just like 2 jacks and a 1M trim pot. Yeah, so I like even just putting the stepped output directly into the same CV input. So if I could do this. You get weird things, some weird fun that way. Of course, you can just use another oscillator to go into the CV input. Then you can just cross modulate these. You can use the stepped output to control the other one's CV input. Then these sync inputs, if you cascade them in odd, if you cascade these sync inputs in odd pairs, you get some fun things happening. Like, for instance, if I have these be a kind of medium rate, and this is on Pugix website, but like patching the quantussy like this. Like if I have that CV controlled by that stepped, this CV controlled by this stepped, and that CV controlled by the first one stepped. Then you get some weird random things happening that way. And then if I have, I'll make one of these audio rate, and you get some amplitude modulation, some FM in there. Then we could use our delay. Oh, another thing I didn't talk about is these, this will make more sense when I'm putting in some actual content to be sampled, but these are Dolby switches. So the there's one for the input and for the effect. In the up position, it acts like a noise gate. It'll only let the signal in when it thinks that there's signal happening, and then otherwise it'll just cut out the rest of the audio. In the middle position, it does nothing, and in the bottom position, it will only let in the audio when there's no audio happening on the effect. So like, say I have an effect, and when there's no audio in the effect, it'll let in the input. Then for the effect, in the up switch, it does the same thing. It's a noise gate. It only let in audio from the effect when it thinks there's audio coming in. In the down switch, it will only let in the effect when there's no audio coming in from the input. It can get kind of confusing, but it'll make more sense later. But I'm gonna put it. I'm just gonna make these continuously recording, and use this sort of as the delay effect, stereo delay effect. And at slower rates, you can kind of hear the Dolby happening. See, when there's no audio, now you hear our delay trail. I'm just switching the rate from audio rate to a slower rate so that it cuts out, so you can hear the trail of the delay. Otherwise, if it's in the middle position, it won't affect it. So now I just sampled some of what we were listening to. And this is a good way to just have like a simple ambient patch going, is just have I didn't even talk about the skips and the outputs over here, but we'll get to that. Yeah, just using it as a simple delay effect, just having that up. You can play with the delay times. The slower the delay time that you're recording at, the crunchier the delay will be. So there's an input for F and S. This is the forward reverse input. So if you can't really, you can kind of hear the loop. So we have a loop here. If I take something like a stepped output and go in there, you can kind of hear it reversing and going forward and going backwards. Or let's take my voice. Let's sample something from my voice and make it more clear. Even though that was a kind of nice thing we had there. So what I'm gonna do now is take this XLR output and go into our input here, and I'm gonna stack it and go into our input over here. I'm going to turn this mic off. Turn up our gain. You can hear me. Now you're hearing me through the Coco. Turn up our effect. And then change these times. It'll pitch it down, but it'll also let more of our audio in. So we have a longer loop. Also let more of our audio. So we have a longer loop. Also let more of our
audio in, so we no longer will also let more of our audio in, so we no longer will also let more of our audio in, so we no longer will also let more of our audio in, so we no longer will also let more of our audio in, so
now this is a good example of what the Dolby switches do.
so we no longer will also let more of our audio in,
So say if we wanted to record something,
of our audio
and I'm gonna click these buttons and it's gonna start recording.
audio in, so we no longer will also let more of our
This is an example of what the Dolby switches do.
more of our
This is an example of what the Dolby switches do.
more of our
This is an example of what the Dolby switches do. So this is cool because it'll cut out what we previously recorded and input the new thing. Dolby switches do, and it's a really clean way to like add new content without overdubbing. It just replaces it. Of what the Dolby switches do. This is an example of what the Dolby switches do. Now we can put something to our flip input. Flip input? Flip and skip? This is an example of what the Dolby switches do. This is an example of what the Dolby switches do. This is an example and now I'm going to take them going to take them out of the flip input and put them into the skip input so you can see what that sounds like. And then the gray jacks in the middle are the output for the delay themselves. So if you wanted to use this as a mono delay, you could, as a dual tap mono delay, for example, you can go in, go out, and go into the input of the other one, and then your output of the other delay will be the dual delay in mono, or one delay going into the other delay. Or if you wanted to make something come out mono, you would take the output of this, put in here, take the output of that, put in here, and then it'll be mirrored to both. So you could do that. Well, this is what the skip does. This is if we add some modulation to this. And then the final thing to do, of course, is to do some amplitude modulation and some panning on our effect, and maybe even our voice again. Or let's try something else. I'm gonna put the Proteus EMU. I have a little rack mount sound module. I'm gonna try and put into the Coco as our input. So we have a Proteus. It's coming in in mono. So we're gonna go through our piezo. If it's coming in mono, whatever, we can stack it and have it go to both of these. Over here. This longer one for here. So we have like random whatever. So many weird things on here. Okay, so to sample something else, we have the EMU Proteus or whatever, an old 90s rack mount module. It's great because it just has a bunch of different things on it that we can play around with. We still have our patch set up, and I'm gonna attempt to just do like a granular delay. So I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna turn that delay time kind of upwards, and have them be slightly different. And then I'm just gonna leave it patched and controlling the flip and skip, and you get some random granular things when this is at like a kind of lower rate of modulation on those happening. And then you'll hear our input in a second. And then I'm going to sample it. And now we're going to add some panning and amplitude modulation onto this. So if you go into, sorry if my mic is clipping, but if you go into an input with something that you want to modulate it, so we can see that's changing the volume of the left one. And then you stack it and go into the inverse input of the volume of the other one, they will pan back and forth. So when it receives a low voltage, now that one will be high. So if I stack this and go into the other input over here, I'm gonna come back to my mic over on the Coco. That was a good example of how the Coco can kind of get kind of chaotic really fast. There are a few other things we need to go over, like these yellow jacks, which are the clock out of the Cocoquantus here. So it's the clock noise from the delay. So if you can just listen to the kind of sound like horns. patch our other one in here. Can add some modulation and some delay and play with it. So I'm just gonna this be controlled by one of these oscillators here. Also added the wingie to the setup over here by Mengchi. It's a really good pair with the Cocoquantus. We're gonna explore that a little bit later. So the thing with this is when you're sampling, like we just sampled this. Now this will change the pitch of that. This will change the pitch of our delay, but also it'll change the pitch of the clock. So. So that's the one case in which the delayed signal will be the same pitch as your incoming signal when you're using this. But you can also cross patch them like this. Like you can have one delay sound, clock sound, horn sound, or whatever come out of one to the other. There's some super cool sounds that way too. It's a really nice feature. And then we can go over the range of that again really quickly. And another fun trick with the Cocoquantus is patching that that delay sound into our skip inputs over here. So I'm gonna turn the Coco down for this, but basically it's some feedback patching going on. AB is that, so let's turn Coco down. And first I'm gonna have these recording constantly, and we're gonna patch our yellow into our skip input and turn up our effect. And do the same thing on the other side. But I really like the sounds it makes when you feed back the Coco this way. modem sounds. Then you get your sort of like your classic no input mixer sounds here, and then when you overdrive it, you start to get like slower pulses, sort of like using a no input mixer situation on a mixer. It cuts out, and then also if you have cold Mac for Eurorack, it's similar to how that oscillator feedback patch works, so it's fast and then slower. And when you have these sparse pulses, it's nice to put into some sort of resonator. So we have wingie over here. also get some cool things when you do into the other one. You can play around with that. That's that. Another trick that I really like is recording CV into these inputs. It kind of slews it in a weird way, slows it down. So let's take a, it's better just demonstrate this. Let's have an oscillator here. Have one of these stepped outs control that frequency. And now we want to record that, so I'm just going to have that stepped output go into here. We're hearing the pulse. I'm going to turn this up and record it. And now I'm going to take the output of this, which is the gray jack over here. That's the output of this delay. So that's going to output what we've recorded. And I'm going to go into the CV input. Then we can have another oscillator go in, maybe. Have that also be controlled. I'm just going to stack this out. And maybe also control this with something else like the step voltage. Or you can control this pacing. Or I could have that loop be recorded and then use that audio or that voltage coming from there to control something else. Have this control our second oscillator instead. Some fun patch ideas that way. And then another trick. The other trick involves ground. I didn't really talk about ground, but there's a black jack on the side for if you have other banana gear. For example, synth over here, not gonna be synth over here. It's not gonna be in focus at all, but it's just a DIY like Rolls 5 situation. Yeah, any other banana synth like Surge or other Ciat Lonbarde instruments, you should connect the ground between the instruments with the ground jack and a banana cable, because unlike Eurorack jacks or quarter-inch jacks, banana cables do not carry ground; they only carry the signal. So if you have like a jumbler or like some sort of format converter, you would also connect the ground to that format converter so that the ground can be shared with the sleeve, I believe. Yeah, the sleeve of the Eurorack jack or quarter-inch jack. But you can use ground to sort of add voltage to these attenuators and push them in a direction further than they would go otherwise. So let's say I have don't remember why this wasn't stereo. Let's see. All right. So we have our synthesizer here. And say we want to use this as a normal delay. So it's recording. So now this knob is, these are the fastest they can be because the knob is turned all the way up. But let's just loop that. So that's our looping thing. If you patch from the ground jack into these inputs, you can push those times even faster or even slower than they would have been otherwise. So I'm just going to stack this. And now our delay time is much faster. Take them out, they'll go back to their original speed, which will also slow it down. This is useful because now you have that original range, which is pretty large already, but then you can use one of these jacks, slow down the range of one even farther, like way down, and then you can use that output as CV to control something else. Almost like turning a VCO into an LFO. So let's have an oscillator here going into this channel over here on our right. And let's use that super slowed down voltage to control the frequency of that oscillator. Also, it loses a lot of fidelity when it goes down that much, so it's not really controlling the oscillator how I thought it would. But an idea gives you ideas of things to do. I think that's pretty much everything on the Coco. Those are all the techniques that I use, or little tips and tricks. Another tip is just like compression. So if you have like, let's loop something here, have these go at different rates. let's say I have another instrument coming in. Let's choose anything else. Yeah. We could just use an envelope follower and go into the inverse VCA. Then you get like a really beautiful compression using that envelope follower and the inverse VCA of the effect. I'm gonna add some reverb here again. I just have the Octatrack here off screen adding effects. Add some amplitude modulation to that. I forgot I had this wingie on the whole time. Sometimes I forget that that's on. Have the pitch of these also controlled by that envelope follower. So that sort of high-pitched squealing thing you're hearing is the result of the inputs being stacked, and that it's introducing noise into the signal that we're recording, which we don't really usually want, but it kind of sounds cool in this situation. So.